What's going on, guys? Back at it again with another Bastian build here on the channel. This one I am calling the Catalyst. The reason why I'm calling this build the Catalyst is because it's a special kind of build here on the channel, or for this companion in general. This build, the 100% sole purpose of this build is to buff you. Bastian is a companion that has a couple of skills in his tool set in which has the capabilities to make your DPS a little bit better. But not just yours, also the overall damage output of your group as well. So this is a very good build to really just boost up you and your entire team. Because of that, again, I called this build the Catalyst. Very excited to jump into this one, guys. If you are too, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, let's jump right into this. Alright guys, so I want to start off by looking at his Imperial skills or his passive, because it does kind of have a little bit of influence over this build, right? It's called Tough. Increases max health by 3% and damage done by 3%. So the damage done portion of this really is irrelevant for this specific build, but the max health really does help with his survivability. 3% isn't really a lot, but it is a difference maker. It could be the difference between life and death for him, so it really just helps that level of survivability for him just that much more. In terms of skills, the bread and butter of this entire build is searing weapons. The cooldown for this is 16 seconds, but it reads as, Bastian Hallex charges their weapons and their allies' weapons with volcanic power, increasing their damage done with light and heavy attacks by 15% for 10.5 seconds. So this skill is fantastic for any damage dealing person out there that's good with light attack weaving and everything like that. Or even if you're a heavy attack build, this skill is just going to buff your heavy attacks, allowing you to do 15% more damage. This skill is absolutely the lifeline, the lifeblood of this build completely. If you're able to do very healthy light attack weaves and stuff like that with your build, with your attacks, then you're just going to be dealing 15% more damage on your light attack side, allowing you to increase your overall DPS. This skill is fantastic, and the fact that it lasts for 10.5 seconds with the cooldown of 6 seconds, that only leaves 5.5 seconds in which you are not going to have this up, therefore allowing you to be able to dish out a lot of damage while it's active, because it is active for a very long time. 10.5 seconds is not a small number, guys. 10.5 seconds is a massive number, and yeah, this is the absolute lifeline of this build. In the number 2 skill is Rejuvenation. As you guys can see, he is using a restoration staff, and because of that, I did want to take advantage of Rejuvenation because it does help with not just his survivability, but your survivability, allowing you to focus more on the DPS output instead of self-sustained heals. It's always important that you are able to self-sustain your heals, but with Bastian in this specific build, it's really not as important, because he's able to provide a little bit of your healing capabilities because of this. So again, the cooldown is 12 seconds, and it Rejuvenation reads as, Bastion shares their staff's life-giving energy, healing themselves and nearby ally for 11,172 health over 10.5 seconds. So it is over a long period of time, 10.5 seconds, a pretty good amount of health, but it's a ticking basically over the 10.5 seconds. With the current setup that I have, it didn't increase the health, the healing capability, but it did increase the duration of the actual ability itself. So you'll get less heals for a longer amount of time, which really does help for the sustainability over that 10.5 seconds. In the number 3 slot, Basalt Barrier. Basalt Barrier The cooldown is at 12 seconds and it reads as Bastian Hallex calls the earth to their defense, granting a damage shield for them and their allies that absorbs 4,350 damage for 7.9 seconds. While the damage shield holds, healing received is increased by 15%. So this right off the bat is not a huge damage shield, but it does help. Anything that will help reduce any kind of incoming damage is good in my opinion. And also, while the damage shield is up, heals are effectively buffed by 15%. This is an absolute must for survivability, not just for you, but for anybody in the group, including Bastian himself. So this is a fantastic skill to have slotted for two reasons. One, the healing capabilities is increased by 15%, but also the damage shield is nothing to scoff over. It's not, it may be a small number, but it really does help with the survivability of anybody affected by this damage shield. So great skill to have slotted regardless, especially since we do have a couple of heals to throw on here that are only going to get buffed while this skill is active. In the number 4 slot, we have Kindle. Kindle has a very fast cooldown of 8 seconds, allowing him to use this skill effectively very, very often, which is an absolute plus. This is one of my favorite heals for Bastian because of the very, very small cooldown. But Kindle reads as Bastian Hallex launches a searing fireball at themselves or an ally to cauterize their wounds, healing for 9,309 health. Because this skill is able to be active so often, that 9,000 health that it heals is just amplified that much more because he is able to dish it out over and over and over again. And if he is cauterizing, if you will, somebody who is affected by Basalt Barrier, this heal is only going to be 15% stronger. Whatever that number is, it's whatever it is, I don't know. But it's going to be an absolute beast of a heal and absolute must for this build, in my opinion. Last but not least, in terms of your regular skills or his regular skills, is haste. This skill is very important for this build because of what it does, right? In order for this skill to be equipped, you have to have 5 pieces of light armor equipped. So that's kind of a spoiler in a sense for when we get into the gear section, but we'll get to that in a second. But what this skill does, it reads as Bastian Hallex focuses their magical energies inward, resetting the cooldown of all their other abilities. Because of this skill, you are able to reset all of your skills on your bar, including searing weapons. So even though it has a 5.5 second reset, if he activates this skill after this has been effectively used up, there will be no overlap, allowing him to use this skill for 21 seconds straight up. It's pretty insane. The DPS output potential for this is absolutely insane for you. So this skill is an absolute must. The only downfall is that the cooldown is at 36 seconds. However, it's not really noticeable in the grand scheme of things because of everything that this build does. It's pretty remarkable, and if I do say so myself. We will get into a boss fight, but I do want to just say though, even though we're gonna go quote-unquote solo a world boss, it's not really the main objective that I have isn't to do DPS or anything like that. I just kind of want you to see how often he's going to have searing weapons up because of this current setup. It's absolutely insane how long he is able to keep this skill up. And as long as this skill up, the damage output of your DPS is greatly improved if you're able to light attack weave or if you're a heavy attack build in general. Really, really good skill if I'm being completely honest, and this build is absolutely remarkable. In terms of the ultimate, Unleashed Rage. Bastian Hallex builds up Rage, then unleashes it in a devastating explosion around him. The explosion deals 13,442 fire damage to enemies and stuns them for 5.2 seconds, while also releasing 4 lines of fire in a cross formation that deals an additional 3,360 flame damage to any enemy they hit. So I do have to say, this is a fantastic, it's one of my favorite ultimates if I'm being completely honest, for a companion. However, this skill, because he's a ranged build, really is going to be somewhat irrelevant. It's not really going to be used as much as you might think he will, because again, the enemies are going to be focused on you. If the enemies then in turn and face him, then he will probably use it. You won't see it being used in this specific video because I'm going to maintain taunt, because the objective that I'm going to try to portray to you is just the amount of time that he is able to keep searing weapons up. So for this video specifically, this ultimate really is not important. The only time it will be important is if he's actually being attacked, which, if you're doing your job as a DPS, really it shouldn't be that often. But let's go ahead and move on to the gear. So when it comes to gear, I like to emulate my companions in the same fashion that I build my own characters. What I mean by that is simple. When I build my own characters, I usually go with 2 5-piece sets and a 2-piece monster set. We don't have monster sets for companions, of course, so I like to replace that and call it just a 2-piece. So for companions, I go with 2 5-piece sets and a 2-piece. So for the first 2-piece set, I went with Augmented in Light. For both the head and the shoulders, Augmented increases the duration of buffs and debuffs by 2.6%, which directly affects the longevity or the duration of your searing weapons. It makes it go all the way up to 10.5 seconds. It also increases the duration of your rejuvenation to 10.5 seconds, which could be a good or a bad thing depending on what your objective is for rejuvenation. I think having smaller heals over a longer period of time is probably the more optimal thing. So having rejuvenation here is an absolute must. It also affects your damage shield, increases it up to 7.9 seconds, which is an absolute, it's crazy how much this really buffs. So having Augmented in the head and the shoulders, which increases again 2.6% duration of your buffs and your debuffs, is pretty fantastic. In terms of your first 5-piece, lo and behold, I have Augmented again all in light, which again increases the duration of buffs and debuffs by 2.6%. Absolutely great trait to have, if I'm being completely honest. And of course it's all in light so that you can have haste active or able to be activated by Bastian, because if you don't have at least 5 pieces of light armor, then you just have a dead skill slotted for Bastian. So very important to have at least 5 pieces of Augmented so that you can keep those buffs, you know, active for longer. In terms of your last 5-piece set, of course, it's going to be Augmented. Augmented for all 3 of the jewelry, and of course for your restoration staff, which is going to be important for you to have some of your heals in specifically rejuvenation. But since the restoration staff is considered a 2-piece, it is buffed by 5.2% instead of 2.6%. This is absolute insanity in terms of increasing the duration of your skills, which you guys will see once we get to a boss fight. But that's it for the gear. Let's go ahead and go over to the house and check out the fashion. Okay, so this fashion is very boring in the sense that I don't really have much going on for him. He is wearing a costume, which is an in-game costume that you can get on your own or buy it off, buy pieces of it for in guild traders and stuff. But the costume itself is called 6th Legion robe, which I thought looked absolutely fantastic on its own, so I decided not to have any dyes. However, you can go ahead and experiment on whichever, you know, dyes you would like. There is a lot of variations that look fantastic in my opinion. However, I really liked the way it looked, just the way it is. So I kept it the way it is. In terms of my weapon, I have the Imperial Champion Staff, and the dyes are Cyrodiilic Steel, Master Gold, and of course Red Diamond, because it is my favorite color to have for an Imperial. So let me know down in the comment section what you guys think of his fashion. With that being said, let's go ahead and see his natural rotation of skills in a world boss fight encounter. And there you have it, guys. The Catalyst build has officially been completed here on the channel. As I said before, this build is 100% meant for those types of people who are already good at dealing damage to, you know, just in general. They're very good at self-sustaining, even though they can use a little bit more of a buff. That's what this build is for. If you're already good at DPS, but you want a little bit more, Bastian is your guy for you. In terms of self-sustained heals, it's always better that you have self-sustaining heals, but of course with Bastian you have to worry about that a little less because of the way I set up this build. His primary focus is buffing you with his skills. His secondary purpose is to provide a little bit of heals. So if you enjoyed this video, guys, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.